The open road my haven, miles blurring, engine humming, a symphony of solitude. But this drive, this journey, it became a nightmare etched onto my soul. Dusk painted the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple. Shadows stretched, twisting familiar shapes into menacing phantoms. The air, once invigorating, turned heavy with a silence that felt almost predatory. Up ahead, something disturbed the landscape's stark beauty. Dark shapes lay strewn across the asphalt. Like discarded ragdolls, their limbs were twisted at unnatural angles. A chill snaked down my spine. This was not right at all. I slowed the car, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Fear, primal and sharp, tightened its grip on my throat. My foot hovered over the brake. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows from the figures on the road. Their forms seemed to writhe and contort even in death. A silent tableau of suffering. My mind, desperate for a rational explanation, conjured images of a terrible accident. But deep down, a terrifying truth began to dawn. This was no accident. This was something far more sinister. I pulled over, a safe distance from the figures. The road was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. The twilight cast long shadows, making the scene even more surreal. The silence was deafening, broken only by the ragged rasp of my own breath. Each inhale felt like a struggle, as if the air itself was thick with dread. The landscape around me was barren, devoid of life, amplifying the sense of isolation. Curiosity, a morbid fascination, drew me closer. My feet moved almost of their own accord, each step hesitant yet compelled by an unseen force. The closer I got, the more I felt an inexplicable pull, a need to understand the grotesque scene before me. The figures were human, that much was clear, but there was something profoundly wrong about them. They stood in unnatural poses, their silhouettes distorted by the dim light, but their bodies were twisted, contorted in ways that defied the natural order. It was as if they had been frozen in the midst of some horrific transformation, their forms caught between human and something else entirely. Limbs bent at impossible angles, arms twisted behind backs, legs contorted in ways that seemed to mock the very idea of anatomy. It was a grotesque parody of the human form, faces frozen in silent screams, their mouths were open wide, eyes bulging with terror, yet no sound escaped their lips. It was as if they had been silenced at the peak of their agony. One figure lay closer than the others. Unlike the rest, this one was prone, sprawled on the ground as if discarded, a woman, her face pale and drawn, her eyes staring vacantly at the twilight sky. Her expression was one of utter desolation, as if she had seen something so horrifying that it had drained the very life from her. Her chest rose and fell with shallow, uneven breaths. She was alive, barely. Each breath seemed to be a monumental effort, her body struggling to cling to life. But as I reached out a hand to help, I noticed something truly horrifying. My hand trembled, hesitating as I drew closer to her, something that made my blood run cold. Her skin, where it should have been warm and soft, was cold and rigid. It was as if she was already halfway to becoming one of those twisted figures. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me reeling in horror. The woman's chest wasn't rising and falling with breath. It was eerily still, as if life had abandoned her body. It was something else entirely. Beneath the surface, a strange, unsettling movement began to ripple. Something moving beneath her skin. Something alive. It slithered and writhed, creating grotesque bulges that traveled across her flesh. Then, with a sickening crack, her neck twisted. The sound echoed in the silent room, a horrifying reminder of the unnatural forces at play. Her head snapped up, eyes blazing with an inhuman light. They glowed with a malevolent intensity, piercing through the darkness. A low growl rumbled from her throat, a sound that seemed to vibrate deep within my bones. Panic seized me, my heart pounding in my chest. This was no ordinary woman. She was a nightmarish vision, a twisted parody of humanity. These were not the victims of some tragic accident, they were something else, something monstrous. Creatures born of darkness and fear. I stumbled back, my foot catching on the uneven pavement. The ground seemed to shift beneath me, adding to my disorientation. I fell, scrambling backwards in terror as the woman rose to her feet, her movements fluid yet disturbingly unnatural. Her body moving with an unnatural fluidity that defied the grotesque angles of her broken limbs. It was as if she was performing a macabre ballet, each motion more horrifying than the last. Her face remained expressionless, a mask of eerie calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos of her movements. My eyes widened with fear, sweat trickling down my forehead. I could feel my pulse racing, each beat a reminder of my own vulnerability. In the shadows, other figures began to stir, moving closer. They were drawn to the spectacle, their intentions unknown but undoubtedly sinister. My hands trembled as I gripped a nearby object, seeking any form of stability in this nightmarish scenario. The woman advanced, her eyes locked on me. There was a predatory gleam in her gaze, a promise of impending doom. I tried to push away, my feet slipping on the rough pavement. Desperation clawed at my mind, urging me to escape. She reached out, her fingers curling like claws. The air seemed to grow colder, the darkness pressing in around me. My breath came in ragged gasps, my eyes wide with terror. This was a nightmare come to life, a dance of death that I was helpless to stop. She loomed over me, her shadow engulfing me. The nightmarish ballet continued, each step bringing me closer to an inevitable end. Section 5, Flight into Fear. Adrenaline surged through me. I scrambled to my feet, my gaze darting between the approaching woman and my car. I had to get out of there. Now! I fumbled with my keys, the metal slick with sweat. The woman advanced, her movements jerky and disjointed, yet impossibly fast. Her growl turned into a high-pitched shriek that seemed to pierce my eardrums. The engine roared to life. I threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel as I careened away from the nightmare tableau. The figures illuminated in my rearview mirror seemed to writhe and twitch, their movements taking on a horrifying synchronized rhythm. Section 6. The Relentless Pursuit. I didn't dare slow down. My legs burned with the effort, but I couldn't afford to stop. The fear coursing through my veins was like a relentless tide, pushing me forward, urging me to keep moving. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee from the unseen horrors that lurked in the shadows. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, but the darkness seemed to close in around me, suffocating and oppressive. To put as much distance between me and those things as possible. The night was alive with the sounds of my own ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart, a symphony of terror that echoed in the stillness. But the road stretched endlessly before me, a never-ending path that seemed to mock my desperation. Each step felt like an eternity, and the end was nowhere in sight, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the inky blackness. The headlights flickered, casting eerie, dancing shadows that only intensified my terror. The darkness seemed to come alive, with every shadow hiding a potential threat, casting dancing shadows that only intensified my terror. The shadows twisted and turned, creating monstrous shapes that played tricks on my mind, making me question what was real and what was imagined. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the roar of the engine. Each beat was a reminder of my vulnerability, a stark contrast to the mechanical growl of the car that seemed to offer no solace. A frantic drumbeat against the roar of the engine. The engine's roar was a constant companion, a reminder of the speed I needed to maintain to stay ahead of whatever was chasing me. The events of the past few minutes played over and over in my mind, a terrifying loop of horror. Each memory was a vivid snapshot of fear, a reminder of the danger that was all too real. A terrifying loop of horror. The images replayed in my mind like a broken record, each one more horrifying than the last, each one pushing me further into the depths of my own fear. And then, I saw them. Two figures, silhouetted against the horizon. They were far away, but their presence was unmistakable. A chill ran down my spine as I realized they were getting closer. Two figures, silhouetted against the horizon. They were far away, but there was no mistaking their unnatural, contorted forms. They were following me. Their movements were slow, deliberate, and filled with a malevolent intent that sent waves of dread through me. But there was no mistaking their unnatural, contorted forms. They were following me. I could feel their eyes on me, piercing through the darkness, watching my every move. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no escaping them. They would follow me to the ends of the earth, relentless in their pursuit. Despair threatened to consume me. Was there no escape from this nightmare? But then, through the haze of terror, I saw a faint glow in the distance. Lights, a town. Hope, fragile but tenacious, flickered within me. I pushed the car harder, urging it onward. The engine whined in protest, but I didn't dare slow down. Not now, not with those things on my tail. The lights grew steadily brighter, resolving themselves into the welcoming glow of street lamps. I could make out buildings now, dark shapes against the night sky. People. Sanctuary. For the first time since the nightmare began, I allowed myself a sliver of hope. The town seemed deserted, streets were empty, houses dark. An unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. The sense of dread, instead of dissipating, intensified. I pulled up to a gas station, its neon sign flickering erratically. The building was dark, the pumps deserted. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone. No signal, of course not. Suddenly, a movement in the shadows across the street caught my eye. A flicker of darkness against the darkness. I held my breath, my heart pounding against my ribs. It was them. They had found me. I didn't wait to see what they would do. Throwing the car into gear, I sped away, leaving the false promise of sanctuary behind. The road stretched before me, once again a dark and lonely ribbon winding into the unknown. The memory of that night, the horror of those contorted figures, has never left me. It haunts my dreams, lingers at the edge of my waking thoughts. The open road, once my sanctuary, now feels different, tainted. The world feels colder, darker. Now every shadow seems to hold a hidden menace. Every rustle in the night sends a shiver down my spine. I'm no longer the carefree traveler I once was. I am haunted. Some wounds, I know, never truly heal. They leave scars, visible and invisible, that shape us, change us. And sometimes in the quiet hours I can almost hear them. The whisper of footsteps on the pavement. The soft, chilling laughter carried on the wind. I am never truly alone. Not anymore. The shadows on the road taught me that lesson all too well.